Hi, this is Stephen Devincenzi. Today we have a bonus episode of Simple English News Daily, Send 7, different to our normal 7-minute news updates. Last week, a listener of Send 7 from Turkiye sent us a video of Nesly, who is a social media influencer who makes short English learning videos for a Turkish audience, talking about femicide in Turkiye and the problems of Turkiye leaving the Istanbul Convention, which is meant to protect women. I invited Nesly to talk with me on this podcast, and today's episode is our conversation. Nesly talks about femicide in Turkiye, what the Istanbul Convention is, and how it protects women, and what has happened since the removal of the convention 3 years ago. Because of the discussion of violence, please don't listen to this episode with children. Send 7 is free, but if you would like to help to support us, have access to the transcripts of all episodes, including this one, and our weekly worksheets and world news quiz, you can become a supporter at send7.org. Now, here is Nesly. I'm joined by Nesly. Nesly, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Could you just tell our audience a little bit about who you are?
Sure. My name is Nesly. I'm a Turkish influencer with over 1 million followers across all platforms. I'm also an English teacher, and I have an English teaching platform, which is primarily what I'm known for in Turkey.
Fantastic. We're going to be talking about a very difficult thing today. We're going to be talking about femicide. I thought maybe you could give a description of what femicide is before we continue.
Sure. Femicide is the gender-based killing of a woman or girl by males. The most common form of femicide is intimate partner murders and sometimes the honor killings of women.
Right. And one of the main reasons that I wanted to talk to you is because I saw a video that you'd made on TikTok or Instagram or both, where you spoke about the Istanbul Convention. Could you just tell us what the Istanbul Convention is?
Sure. So last week, a horrific murder happened in Turkey, which resulted in the killing of Iqbal Uzunar and Ayşenur Halil. What I mentioned in the video was that if we still had the Istanbul Convention in place, this murder would not have happened. So the Istanbul Convention is a human rights treaty of the Council of Europe opposing violence against women and domestic violence. It was actually first opened up for signature in 2011 in Istanbul and Turkey. Ironically, Turkey was also the first party to withdraw from the convention, and now we're suffering from its effects.
Yeah, right. I mean, the fact that it was that it's called the Istanbul Convention, that's just a coincidence, right? I mean, it could have been signed in a different place, but it happened to be signed in Istanbul, and that's why it's called the Istanbul Convention, right? But it's made between many, many countries of Europe, I think.
Most European countries partake in the Istanbul Convention, but actually it's not a coincidence that it was signed in Turkey. There was a case of a Turkish woman that was suffering, I think, from domestic violence, and that's how it came to be appealed, basically. The reason why the Istanbul Convention is so essential for women in Turkey and also all over the world is that it persecutes all the steps leading up to an actual femicide, as we talked about. So the Istanbul Convention actually criminalizes these: sexual harassment, stalking, psychological violence, domestic and sexual violence, and also economic violence. So the Istanbul Convention persecutes people who partake in these things.
It's the difference is that other laws that maybe each country might have would prosecute the individual crimes of murder or of violence against a woman, but the Istanbul Convention actually helps to prevent those crimes from happening in the first place, because it goes further to things like harassment, I don't know, and some other things which maybe would not be covered by the individual laws of each country. Is that right?
Yes, correct. The Istanbul Convention criminalizes sexual harassment, stalking, psychological violence, domestic and sexual violence. It also protects not only women, but children and also other men that are suffering from abusers. So it's very important in the protection of women in the sense that it basically persecutes all the steps leading up to an actual femicide. So in the normal world, usually men don't come up to a woman and just kill her. There's some sort of connection involved. And this connection might start off as stalking, sexual harassment, domestic violence. And the reason why Istanbul Convention is so important is that it persecutes these steps. So the femicide that could potentially happen is stopped.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important.
Well, it seems natural for most countries to want to sign this, and many countries did sign this, including, of course, Turkey. But yeah, I think it was 3 years ago now, in 2021, that
Yes.
Turkey withdrew from the Istanbul Convention. Do you know what reason was given for this, or why Turkey left the convention?
Yeah. And Turkey was the only party to leave the convention once again. The reasoning given for why the convention was abolished is that it was disrupting the traditional Turkish family structure. So some people were saying that it encourages women to divorce from their husbands, or, it was basically just wedging like families apart. That's what some people were saying. But I don't think it makes sense at all, to be honest.
Yeah, I see. And what effects have there been from leaving the Istanbul Convention?
There have been a lot of effects. Ever since 2011, the number of femicides have only been going up. In 2024 alone, there have been 298 femicides alone. And these are only the confirmed murders. There's also suspicious murders that people think are femicides secretly. And the rate of suspicious women deaths has risen by 82% in the last 7 years in Turkey. This is huge.
Yeah.
So the effects from leaving the Istanbul Convention is hitting us harder every year, and we desperately need it back for this reason.
Right. In your video that I saw, you were talking about the murders of two young women. Maybe you could tell us about that story.
On the 4th of October in 2024, Iqbal Uzuner and Ayşenur Halil were brutally murdered by Semih Çelik. This took place in Istanbul, and it caused a huge outrage in the public in Turkey. So the reason why this happened is because the death was so brutal and graphic that people basically lost their minds. On the 4th of October, Semih killed Ayşenur at home, and he slit her throat. Afterwards, he left for the city walls and invited Iqbal Uzuner there. And when she came, he killed her, and he dismembered her body in a horrific way that I really can't describe. He positioned her body parts in such a horrific way. And after he did that, he called Iqbal's mother. He invited her to see what had happened to her daughter. And when she came, he threw Iqbal's decapitated head down the walls. So yes, it's absolutely horrific.
Yeah, that's really incredibly brutal. I'm so sorry to hear about that. And well, he sounds like a complete psychopath, but he killed himself after that. Is that right?
Yes, he jumped down the walls and killed himself. But what's important here, I think, is that before this, Semih was constantly disturbing Iqbal. He was a stalker of Iqbal. And he even sent her a video stating like how much he wanted to murder her. So this was going through his mind before all of this even happened. And he even made like a drawing with charcoal, like how he was going to position her dead body parts. So this was completely premeditated. And the reason why people are so upset is because Iqbal had reported him to the police because he was constantly disturbing her. But the police didn't do anything. If the Istanbul Convention was still in place, she could have gotten a restraining order and some preventative measures could have been taken. But nobody noticed that all of this was going on. So when all the signs were there and this girl and her friend was killed horrifically, people just, people went crazy, and rightfully so.
So you would say that if the Istanbul Convention were still in place, then maybe these two girls wouldn't have been murdered because the Istanbul Convention makes illegal various things that this psychopath has done before the murders took place. Yeah, is that right?
Yeah. As I mentioned, the Istanbul Convention criminalizes and punishes all the steps leading up to an actual femicide, like stalking and murderous threats like Semih did to Iqbal. So if we still had that, I think there was a chance of it not happening. And so that's why people are so upset. And that's why we need the Istanbul Convention back. We have several laws in place. The law of 6284 that aims to help protect women from domestic violence. The truth is we need more laws like that, and we need more laws that specify the principle of a woman's statement, which means that because there's usually no evidence of sexual harassment or other crimes like that, the woman's statement is taken into account and an investigation is started. We need more laws like this. The truth is, it's not just about Iqbal and Ayşenur. There are many other women in Turkiye that are suffering from this fate, and they can't do anything to help themselves because the system is not helping us at all. And so we desperately need a change.
Yeah. There's been a lot of protests since these particular murders. There's been a lot of women protesting in Istanbul and I think in other places as well. Is the main thing that is being asked for the reinstatement of the Istanbul Convention, or are there other things as well?
For a start, the Istanbul Convention's reinstatement would be great. And another thing, like I said, the principle of a woman's statement, we need more laws that reinstate this. We need more laws that protect women and children from domestic violence, stalking, threats, sexual harassment. Because if we don't protect women that are having this happen to them at this early stage, then they could be killed, because it just doesn't start as a man killing a woman. There's usually a precedent, and we need laws that prevent these precedents from happening. Like I said, it's just the impunity of these sexual crimes, I think, encourages more potential abusers from doing more crimes like this. Just 2 days ago, or the same day that Iqbal and Ayşenur were murdered, 2 men tried to rape a woman in broad daylight in Istanbul. So I'm thinking at this point, what gives these men, these abusers, this encouragement? So I'm thinking, if we had preventative measures, then they would not have had the courage to do stuff like this. Yeah. Right now in Turkiye, they're talking about chemical castration, and this being a potential punishment for rapists. But I don't know if that's going to be enough. I think we need to protect women before anything happens, and not
after, but before.
Yeah, not after, but before. We need to act before women are killed. We don't just punish the persecutors. We need to protect the women before anything even happens to them. And that's why the Istanbul Convention is so important. And unfortunately, we need to do a public outcry for these kind of changes to even happen. So that's why I came here to speak with you today, because our voices sometimes aren't heard, and sometimes we need the world's help to help us make it heard.
Right. Yeah. Well done for doing that. It's a great job that you're doing, trying to get this message out. Is there anything else that you'd like to say about this?
There's actually another thing that I wanted to touch up on. In 2011, when the Istanbul Convention was first, put in place, the amount of femicides in Turkey actually have experienced a drop. So there is actual evidence that the Istanbul Convention helps women survive from these kind of things. So if people are wondering like, what's it gonna do, like it's just gonna be all the same, that's not true, because there was a drop in the amount of femicides in 2011 when it was first reinstated. So I just want to say that like it would actually make a difference, and the government needs to do something.
Right. So the number of femicides after the convention was signed went down, and then when it was withdrawn, they went back up again. Is that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So there's really clear statistical evidence that the Istanbul Convention works.
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
And not only that, but like there is this group in Turkey now calling themselves the incels, which stands for involuntary celibates. And they're a group online that are harassing women online, and they're threatening young women and girls into sending them lewd photos of them. And they're basically trying to harass them sexually online. We have a lot of things like this happening, and the reason I think is the impunity of these sexual crimes. If they had been persecuted for these crimes would not be happening in the rate that they're happening today. So we desperately need a change.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, thank you very much, Nestle. If anybody wants to follow you and follow your work, what you do, where would you tell them to go and find you?
Okay, I have one final thing to say. If you're watching this, whether you're from Africa or Asia or Europe, please help us get our voices out. As Turkish women, we are suffering and we desperately need help. Unfortunately, some things just aren't implemented without the power of social media. So your voice is exactly what we need. Please, on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, just please help us get our voices out, help us reinstate this law 6284 and the Istanbul Convention. You can find me at nesly.english on Instagram for my English account. And if you just want to follow me personally, you can just find me at Nesly Pizza.
Lovely. Great. Thank you very much, Nestle. I hope the next time we can talk about a happier topic, but it's excellent what work you're doing. So thank you very much for joining me.
You're welcome. I hope there's some changes so we can talk about some happier things.